Hello, and welcome to Activate Presents Grow Your Mind chat sessions in collaboration with Collabs. I am your host, Anam Sethi. Welcome to the show. Now, a lot of you may not know this, but long time ago, before I joined Activate, actually, I dabbled my fingers a little bit in entrepreneurship. I loved baking and I taught myself how to make cakes, actually. And at that time, I thought it would be a great idea for me to open up a chain of bakeries here in Lahore, Pakistan. And so I packed up my bags and I took a summer in New York where I worked with some of the best bakeries in the city, actually, learning how to make bread, how to produce cakes on a mass scale, how to serve customers, and even working in the office with the finances. And I thought, yes, I've got this. This is probably the best thing I'm going to do. I'm going to go back to Pakistan and I'm going to open up a chain of bakeries. However, when I got here, I realized that the realities of opening up your own business are actually quite different from working in a business that's run by someone else. I think a lot of you are probably experiencing this in COVID times as well, where there's very little distinction between work and home. And there is a general feeling of exhaustion, of always working, of always having to be available that really brings us down. Now, as a businessman, you realize that this is something that you have to not only adapt to, accept, but you have to make it a part of your life. You're constantly going to be stretched. There are also massive burdens when it comes to taking responsibility for so many lives who are now dependent on your business. With COVID times, I think these pressures and these burdens have become so vast. At that point in my life, when I decided to figure out how to run a business, I realized it's not for me, at least not back then. But today we have someone who will talk to you about the realities of running a business here in Pakistan, about how stressful it can be and how we can really move forward and help ourselves grow. So please welcome our mentor today, entrepreneur, restaurateur, and founder of the Bamboo Union restaurant chain, Raza Ahmed. Raza, it is so nice to have you on the show today.
Thank you, Anam, for having me on the show. Thank you very much.
Okay, great. So, Raza, every time we have an entrepreneur on the show, there's one thing everybody wants to know, which is your story. So, tell us, where did you get the inspiration for Bamboo Union from?
So our story, like my story, is not like I always wanted to open a restaurant or um, it didn't even start with a restaurant or being in this industry. It just one thing led to another, and Bamboo Union happened. But once I knew I had to go into this industry. It took me like 6-7 years to actually finally start the restaurant itself. So I went to Canada for college. I came back thinking this is my natural calling. Padhai ho gayi. Now you have to join the family business, which is pharmaceuticals. So I joined a troubled side of the business, which was retail side, which we had recently started, which was retail pharmacies. And I spent good 3 years working there. And during that time, I figured out I just couldn't do it. Pharma in general wasn't something, because my whole family is involved in the whole supply chain. So from raw material import to manufacturing, only retail was missing, which I was a part of at that point. So during that time, I had a couple of issues. First, I thought being the youngest out of my generation, sorry, the eldest out of my generation, which brings my chachas and my father much higher up the hierarchy. So it meant I had to spend years and years proving myself and doing stuff which I didn't like and I couldn't do with freedom. So I thought I really couldn't spend 10, 15 years in this slavery with doing stuff and not getting the real power to make decisions. So I was thinking what to do, and just one day my one of my chachas was like, why don't you, you're so finicky with food, why don't you think about getting into hospitality, because one of your mamus is also in the same business. So I took it as a joke, and I was like, "Acha yaar, I mean, this is not me." But I actually gave it a thought, and I was like, okay, I can actually, I've seen my mamu working, who ran a couple of restaurants in Dubai. So I went there, I worked with him for a year and a half, came back, still had no clue as to what's going to happen. And then my father was somehow convinced, Kecha, now maybe he's ready, but still he wasn't willing to invest anything in me or in my venture. So my mother, this is not a lot of people know about this. My mother was like, okay, this is my property. You want to do something about it? Go open your restaurant, but don't disappoint me. But because this is what I have, this is all what I have.
Wow.
So what I did was I had also learned something with my mamu. He used to trade in a few properties, so I invested in something, and I in real estate, and I got a good return within 2 months. So I had a surplus of 3-4 million rupees out of the initial investment. So I put in everything what I had gotten from my mother and the profits from it, and that's how Bamboo Union started. But
Wow.
the idea itself, it was more structured. It was more,
Yeah.
well researched in terms of, while I was in Dubai, I used to passionately think about, okay, so I need to do something which
Hmm.
is not short term, which is not something which will be a one hit wonder, which it has to be a long term thing. So the idea was to keep the business long term. So I researched on names, big restaurants, why do they survive, how long have they survived, and the failures. So the
Yeah,
biggest
right.
part was how many restaurants have opened up and they've shut down, and why did they shut down. And so my research just told me two major highlights. Pakistani restaurants and Chinese restaurants have a much longer life than any other
Wow.
cafe. Yeah, yeah. So if you look at it this way, and if you can research as well, Chinese restaurants, because somehow, these are two cuisines very close to you. You probably grew up having Chinese food at Shanghai, or all those guys moved out. That's not probably the reason why they shut down. It's a new generation now, though.
Yeah, absolutely. And with opening up, Chinese, Pakistani Chinese in particular, happens to be something I think a lot of us Lahoris can associate with.
Yeah.
Even across the board in Pakistan, it's very dear to our hearts. It's still a very difficult thing to venture into. Like you said, looks like there was a lot of pressure, it being, all your investment, such a long-term plan that you wanted to go ahead with. So Raza, now that you sort of decided that, okay, I'm going ahead with this, I'm going to open a restaurant, what are some of the actions that you took to turn this concept into an actual reality, like on the ground brick and mortar restaurant?
So the basic idea was not to copy paste anything.
Right.
Uh, there was a gap which I saw within the market, that you went to these Chinese places, Asian places, where you were sort of overwhelmed by the atmosphere, white tablecloths, and you had to be at least in a white shirt or a dress
Yeah.
shirt rather than a t-shirt. I clearly remember uh, having an argument with my mother about my clothes when we were go into a Chinese restaurant कि नहीं t-shirt में नहीं जाना. So, and this sort of stuck in my head कि why can't you go to an Asian place where you're casually dressed? So seeing Wagamama and a couple of other places globally, I thought we have enough people to understand the concept where we don't have family servings. We serve food individually, and we just serve Asian food. So it's not like this wasn't being done before. I mean, casual places were all serving like Asian food, fast food, everything all clubbed in together. But my thought process was a bit different. I thought that within the Chinese market, we have this pan-Asian market, which is still sort of untapped. I mean, we
Right.
had a couple of brands which came from abroad. They didn't do well. And again, Thai places um opened up and they shut down. So primarily, my idea was to make it a Chinese Thai restaurant, but not call it Thai
Hmm.
because Thai somehow the name has been a taboo with Lahoris. Whenever a
Interesting.
Thai restaurant opened, it did really well for 6 8 months, and then probably people moved on to a new concept or a new place, and they forgot about the old Thai place, and they had to shut down. And I mean, I'm sure you can recall a couple of good Thai places that shut
Of
down.
course. Yeah. Raza, this is a very interesting thing because, I was going to actually come to this, which is, Bamboo Union officially launched in 2016.
Yeah.
And, just before our eyes, in a couple of years, actually became a household name. So the 6 to 8 month time limit that you're talking about didn't apply to this particular restaurant. In fact, Bamboo Union now has multiple locations, and you're also branching out into similar businesses. So, what does it take, and what do you think is the secret to your restaurant surviving through the masses of restaurants, really good restaurants actually, that actually didn't make it?
I wish I had a oversimplified answer for this, but
Right.
I guess if you stay true to your idea, and that
Hmm.
is being simple, being original, I think a lot of problems arise within our industry because people just don't go for originality, and they don't really strive for making something new or introducing something new, which is uh, you know not too complicated, but
Hmm.
it's something that people just feel, okay, so a certain fine dine is doing it, we should copy paste it, and maybe get their chef, and we'll do a great job. So I wouldn't like to name a restaurant in particular, but I'm sure
Hmm.
everyone can understand that out of the most famous restaurants, if you assume there's a fine dine in Lahore, and every chef in town is running around town saying, "Oh, I know, I'm from this particular eatery, and I
Yeah.
know these dishes," and that's how. Uh, this is something which is very unfortunate for our industry. People just don't think about adding new things from the global menus that they have. In
Hmm.
fact, they try to just copy paste from a rival restaurant locally, which is just they it really doesn't get them far from where they started. So I just feel with us we were very particular about the consistency.
Hmm.
So despite having a lot of problems, like the dollar was at 105 rupees. Now it's at 166 rupees,
Right.
which means everything that we use in the kitchen, which is imported, has just gone so up that more some of the dishes are not even feasible anymore. Although we've jacked up our prices as well, but we really haven't really substituted those ingredients to cheaper ones. So that's something that we haven't really made a compromise on. The ingredients have stayed the same, and we have invested a lot in our talent as well. So we have a good team of chefs now. We started from a very small team.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I really don't have an answer to your question. What really? I mean, it's just a lot of things clubbed in together. Uh,
Right.
of course, it's hard work. I mean, I don't brag about my hard work. I just say it's being at a particular place at a time when there was a gap in the market. So that's
It's a lot of things coming together, from the
yeah.
conversation we're having. We can tell that it has to do with your team, it has to do with the consistency, originality, keeping it simple. So there's a lot of things that you kind of have to maintain at one time. But Raza, talking to you, the one thing that's becoming more and more clear is that entrepreneurship, running a business, running a restaurant, comes with a big heavy emotional burden. uh,
Yes.
Taking investment from your family, investing all that you had, your time, your energy, your mind into this. So, if you can tell us, what are some of the greatest emotional, personal challenges that have come up in your life because of you running a business, and how are you really dealing with those challenges?
Um, I don't know. While the restaurant opened, I think I had a couple of breakdowns when we had just started. And on the first day, I believe we just started serving lunch. And right after the lunch service, our water supply just stopped.
Oh,
And this was and you have to understand, this was a hard labor of love which started. I got this place in March, and we started the restaurant by August, which is by any means a record time for construction to execution, everything. However, it took a lot out of me, emotionally, physically. I lost about 10 kgs within that span of 4 5 months.
hmm.
I didn't even realize that while somebody just mentioned one day, "Oh, I think you've lost some weight." I was, "Acha, really?" And then I looked at my waist and I was like, "Oh yeah, that really happened." And I've lost some excessive fat, so which was good. But I used to take a lot of stress initially. But now I've trained myself to calm down, because running a restaurant in itself, being in any part of the restaurant, be it the front of the house, which is uh, the managerial part where you're serving food and stuff, and then being in the kitchen, these are two poles apart places. However, you have to be crazy to run both sides.
Yeah.
So if you're spending some time in the kitchen, some time on the front side, you're like, okay, I need you know uh, a lot of energy to manage both, because both places have their own energy, both places have their own problems, they both have really different dynamics, and you have to club them all together, and make sure the kitchen people aren't really having a tough time, or are in good terms with the front staff, because if that happens, then you have a big problem.
Right. So tell me, Raza, now that we're talking about front of house as well, and this is something that I don't think we've discussed before, but you're right. You know, with when it comes to the restaurant business, there's a back end, there's a front end, and at the front, you're directly dealing with customers. And I know for a fact that in a business where you're constantly having to interact with customers, there's a lot of service that is involved. What are the principles or sort of some of the tenets that you follow when it comes to customer service, and how do you ensure that your team is on the same page as you?
Um, we, I've just trained our team, and they're very good now. That we cannot argue with any
Hmm.
customer. If they feel
Right.
a certain way, we just have to make them feel that okay, they're right. We cannot even make them feel that okay, we're doing a certain thing because you're saying so.
Hmm.
The most important part is about guest experiences, that the guest should feel that they're being served by somebody who uh, feel that they're special, so they're not be it a person who just ordered a coke or
Hmm.
a big family meal. So
Hmm.
we even don't try to discriminate between people
Hmm.
who order less, because I feel that's where it starts. A
Yeah.
lot of problems arise when you start bifurcating guests. That okay, this is a high paying guest, you have to treat him like a royal prince or something.
Yeah.
So if every guest is treated fairly and the way they should be, then usually you don't have problems. But every now and then you have some issues, because we're also an impatient nation. So
Absolutely. And running the restaurant business, I think a lot of patience has to be exercised because, just a little while ago, you were talking about, breakdowns like your water supply breaking down, and you've got to serve your customers, you've got to interact with them. So, can you tell us about a story or a time when, a catastrophe, for example, happened at the restaurant and how you were able to deal with something like that, especially when it comes to explaining those realities to your customers then?
Um, initially, I think a lot of catastrophes happened. One day, our power supply broke, and 2 3 weeks into the business, into the operations, we saw our cylinders, which were placed outside the restaurant visibly, and people could see that they caught fire. Uh, so that's something people could see as well, and we were really scared about as well. And then something that we had to tell our customers that we won't be taking in any orders, or any orders that have been placed have to be sort of reverse, that we'll call them again, because the kitchen has to be shut down immediately.
Mm,
So that was something which was tough. But looking back, these things, okay, I mean, uh, they would still be a big thing, but now I'm much more relaxed, more calm, and I was pretty much all over the place back then. So
mm.
that's why once or twice I think I had a bad breakdown where I my mother was there, so I literally went up to her and I started crying, and I just couldn't help
Yeah. But then you recover, and I think one thing that we've really learned from this conversation is that the patience to keep going. Uh, Now, these days there's a different kind of catastrophe that we're all dealing with. I don't even know if we're going to call it a catastrophe or something completely out of the blue, but suddenly, in a matter of weeks, life has completely changed and the restaurant industry has been greatly impacted. And rather than really going ahead and asking you how you're dealing with that, what I do want to focus on is what advice can you really give to entrepreneurs, to businessmen who are now, to business women who are now wanting to start their own businesses and are realizing that they have to sort of maneuver through a different world.
Well, I think whenever anyone's starting out, they should do a good deal of due diligence, whatever field that is. They should know how trends have changed, how times have changed. So that's what we at Bamboo Union now are talking about. That whenever the restaurants are going to open up, it's going to be the new normal. So
Yeah.
things are gearing up towards a big change. With us, we saw a very difficult time for the past 3 4 months, and it was more difficult for us because we had just opened up a new branch where uh, we had invested most of our savings at, and we were in a fix because we were expecting cash inflows from both sides to cover for a lot of things that had to be done. So all of a sudden we had to, just realize, okay, no money is going to come back, but we'll have to put in some money. So this was a very tough and challenging time. However, I feel it's more challenging for people who did get unemployed, which is the front of the house staff, the waiters and the managers. We have tried to call them back. 70% of them are still at home. We do try to help them out, but it's just very challenging for everyone. For anyone to start a new business, I feel again they should look into so many different things that have changed now. So many people started just making masks, new masks. That's a new business altogether.
Yeah.
Fashionable masks, and I mean, I'm not throwing out a good idea. I'm just saying that's something which is new. And within our industry, we started car dine, which was an old concept, but we just had to rebrand it and sell it to our customers by telling them, and in fact informing them that it's sort of safe to have food in your car, because we're not serving them the food in our plates. We're
Mm.
giving disposable one-time use cardboard boxes and some other plastic plates.
Yeah, so being adaptable then, I guess, and bringing back something really special. Actually, car dining is something that I grew up with. I have memories of my mother taking me for soup, especially in the car. And I think over the years we had sort of really distanced ourselves from that, and bringing that back, and pulling through with creativity really is a great way to move forward. A few more questions I do want to ask you. Your business really has expanded, though, and I think exponentially so in a very short period of time. Even during COVID, I think Bamboo Union is still considered to be a household name. And so I wanted to ask you, what are some of the things that you do personally to grow yourself and to grow your business and to keep committed to the idea, the concept of Bamboo Union?
I think for me and the business, because I don't call it
Mm,
my own, because I feel it's all teamwork.
yeah.
We've given a lot of liberty to the kitchen, and they come up with a lot of new items on the menu as well. So we
Mm,
keep on experimenting, and we do have a lot of things in the pipeline as well, which we cannot serve right now because some things are just ruined when they're packed. So
right.
when they're served on the table, it's very different. So we keep on working hard on stuff which keeps us relevant and keeps us what we're known for, which is not your typical Chinese food.
Mm. No, that's really great. And Raza, as a final question, we've learned so much from you. I think it was really great to hear a lot of the stories that you shared, because within those stories and within those action items that you took lies a lot of advice and a lot of learning for us on how we can adapt and be flexible as well, and how important really then it does become to constantly innovate, because like you said, we can be really impatient sometimes. And when things like coronavirus happen, or even, without coronavirus, if your water supply breaks down or if your generator doesn't work, those moments where we can really make a decision, adapt, and move forward are the ones that really help us grow. But in your personal life, I always ask this to all my guests. I say, what are some of the things you do to take care of yourself and to develop yourself personally away from Bamboo Union?
I was never a person who would read books, but I
Yeah.
started reading books 5 years ago for personal growth, and that's what I do for personal growth, and which has a lot of stories related to business, and how businesses sometimes fail, and just general personal
Yeah.
growth as well. And I do work out, so that those are the two things that I do to keep myself mentally and physically fit.
Awesome. Well, Raza, I want to thank you so much for being on our show today. We learned a lot, and it was really nice that you really opened up. I think this is one of the few interviews I've had where somebody has really, allowed us into their world and gone deep into the realities of it. So thank you so much for being here and telling us all of this.
Thank you very much, Anna. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, lovely. So I hope our audience also really enjoyed that. That was a very different, unique perspective on how to run a business, especially now. And we really get to learn a lot about being adaptable, being flexible in the moment. I think these are also skills, like Raza was talking about. When you look back, you realize that now you're so much more better equipped to handle these situations. But you really have to go through them in order to learn how to best cope with them. And that is, the joy of staying committed to something and really following through. But before I leave, I do have something for you, your gym task. So this week, I want you to do something that is a little different. If there is an idea that you've been working on, if there is something that you would like to explore, from Raza's story, the one thing we can learn is due diligence. Do your research. I think it's very it's common to see ourselves getting too excited or too fascinated with an idea and thinking that we can really do this. I did my due diligence too. I think I went out and I decided to learn the product, etc. But my research was lacking. I was not aware of the realities of running a business here in Lahore during these times. So, like Raza said, it's very important for us to be aware of where we are, what we need to do, how the world functions, and what aspects we can really pull on to create success in our lives and also to create success for others, for our team, and for the people who depend on us. So do some research, go out there, ask questions, meet with people, really understand the realities of what you're going into. Because the more you know, the better you will be able to handle it when time comes. Thank you so much for being on the show. This was Anam Sethi with Activate's Grow Your Mind chat sessions in collaboration with Collabs. I will see you next week.